happy 2025. Thanks for spending a January evening with us. You are in attendance either in person or you're watching this recording of our first installment of our Accessibility Adventure series, a series where Kristen Harrington and myself will walk you through some important considerations when it comes to creating more inclusive and accessible spaces. And so there is so much to unpack. We had a Live with NCCE recording event this last month, maybe it was in November, that we talked more overview about what this process is going to be like. There's going to be a link in our deck that you can actually access that recording if you want to go back and watch that. But this is our first installment where we really dig into one aspect of creating accessible and inclusive learning design in spaces, and that is engagement. My name is John Pauls. I'm a learning experience designer in Jacksonville, Florida, and I am joined by Kristen Harrington, virtual learning coordinator and author for Florida Diagnostic and Learning Resource Systems, which is right down the road from us. So we are very local. We still have not gone out to dinner together, but we'll put that on the list of things to do. It's the power of technology.
Yes.
And if you ever want to connect with us, our information is up there. Kristen, do you want to say hi to everybody before we get started?
Hi, everyone. I'm excited to be here, and hopefully we'll have something new that you haven't learned yet tonight.
Perfect. So we're going to go ahead and dive right in. First, we want to welcome you to this NCCE special event. If you're not familiar, NCCE is the Northwest Council for Computer Education, which is an amazing organization filled of educators from around the country that provide support, coaching, resources, innovation, leadership to school districts and organizations around the country. So if you are in a school district, if you have any professional learning needs, if you have people that you want to come and speak to conferences, or if you want to come to an amazing conference that is next month in February, NCCE is where you need to be looking. So visit ncce.org and reach out if our organization can help you achieve your digital transformation goals at any time. And we're going to start, as we always do, by framing our conversation. We are all diverse learners. We have a lot that we have processed over our lifetimes. And so we may come to this space with different perceptions and different ideas. They are all valid. We're here to learn from each other. But first, we're going to kind of center this conversation so that we're all in the same vantage point when it comes to discussing engagement, accessibility, and inclusivity. So when we talk about accessibility, the whole point of this series, why NCCE is leading into this space, is because accessibility is important. Accessibility does take intentional effort. It does not happen by happenstance. We have to work to make our world more accessible for everyone. But providing access is always going to be worth the investment. So we thank you for investing your time and joining us for this series. We hope you come back in the future for this. Together in this series and beyond, we're going to explore how we can provide access to all in our own work and in our own worlds. Speaking of future events, this is our January 28th meeting, and we will be doing our next series on February 20th from 7 to 8 p.m. So put that on your calendar. It's going to be another 60 minutes where we get together and we talk about more accessible goodness, this time focusing on representation. We're focusing on engagement today. Representation will be next month. If you want to view previous recordings, if you want to register for upcoming events, make sure to visit that tiny URL or scan the QR code, and you'll have access to the recordings and registration for these future live events. So we hope that if you've missed this one, scan it and register for the next one. And if you're here today, we can't wait to see you next month as well. So we wanted to start again framing this conversation. And if you've been in education for any amount of time, we know that there are certain buzzwords that we hear all over, and sometimes we don't actually think about what that means. And so one of those words to me is engagement. When I talk to teachers in my own practices, especially in 2025, one of the major concerns is engagement. My students may be a little bit more apathetic. How do I engage my students? They're not engaged in the lessons. But what does engagement actually mean? I want you to take just 2 minutes real quick and throw your response in our collaborative chat. If you could define engagement in one sentence, what does that look like to you? And then we'll frame it with how other people see engagement. And while we're getting our responses, if you're watching this virtually after the event, feel free to tweet out or X out or whatever that's called now, or go to LinkedIn and share your responses using at NCCE EdTech and hashtag IMNCCE, and we'll take a look at it. And just have one more minute to get your thoughts in there. All righty. Thank you for sharing, everybody. Some of our responses in our chat. Engagement equals interesting enough to keep me paying attention. Obviously, it needs to be interesting, because if it's not interested, you're snoozing and you're not going to be engaged. We have someone else that says focus on the learning and applying it to your own circumstances. Obviously, yeah, if we are taking what we're learning and we're able to actually apply it to our own lives and generalize that information, I would say that I would be engaged in that situation. And then active participation, some of our wonderful responses. Absolutely. So those are all very valid representations and explanations of engagement. But I do want to look a little deeper at what some other people say about engagement, right? I do want to preface that engagement opportunities are all around us at all times. There is always a way to engage our friends, our family, our students, our professional learning community. We just have to know what that engagement looks like and kind of set some parameters for that. We're going to expand our collective understanding together. So, if we look at society as a whole, what does our societal experience as human beings tell us about the term engagement? So I don't know about you, but when I think about engagement, maybe because I'm a millennial, the first thing that comes to mind outside of teaching is social media engagement. And if you are not on social media, I am very proud of you. But if you are not familiar with this term, engagement as a social media creator, you are talking to your community that you've established. You are liking posts. You are prolonging conversations. You're creating a safe space around your values and who you are, and you're creating this little micro community on social media, and you are engaging with one another in meaningful interactions. Then we can also think about the term like relationship engagement. That comes to mind, right? When somebody or a couple announces their imminent wedding, those are two humans that are brought together with shared goals and shared dreams and a willingness to invest their resources in one another. That is a relationship engagement, right? And then we think about community engagement, where we can rally with people who share our values or who exist in the same spaces as us. And as a community, we can engage with one another on more targeted topics and ideas. Thinking of those special interest groups or professional learning communities. When you build a community and you're engaging in that community, you are giving of yourself and you are sharing with others. And so when you look at all of these ways that we engage existing in society, we then stop and think about what does that look like in the learning environment? And so we look at some of our scholars. And if you are interested, this is actually from a meta-analysis that looked at this exact question of the definitions, dimensions, and major conceptualizations of academic engagement. And I do have the reference and a link to the article right here if you'd like to take a look at it. But according to these authors, engagement is the extent to which students participate in academic and non-academic activities, showing commitment and identification with educational goals. It involves their effort, persistence, emotional investments, and connection with the educational environment. And for me to streamline that down, you'll notice that our little bolded text up here, extent to which students participate, show commitment, ID goals, and establish effort, persistence, and emotional investment and connection with the educational environment. And I think that last part right there, connection with the educational environment, may be one of the most important aspects to any sort of engagement. We have to be connected to the communities that we are building together, because learning and engagement is a multi-dimensional aspect of the learning process. We can't really isolate it in one area and assume that a tool or a specific strategy is going to fix all of our engagement woes. There's a lot that we think about when it comes to engagement. We know that it is also inclusive. If engagement is not inclusive, it cannot really be engaging, because we are not including everybody. And we're not building that community if we're not including everybody. You can see how all of these nest together and make this multidimensional concept. But engagement is also malleable. That means we can take these different aspects of engagement, we can mold them together and make something new. It is never something permanent. There is never one strategy that is going to work every single time with every single audience of learners, because engagement is based on that community that you establish. It is inclusive, it is malleable, and it can adapt to our needs and our students' needs. And engagement can come from a variety of antecedents. So engagement might look like, in classes, a group think, pair, share on the carpet, or engaged in community-based project activities. It could look like a form of quiz where you are assessing students, like maybe using Kahoot. It could be polls. Engagement could look like a student raising their hand for the first time in your classroom to offer their thoughts and their ideas about what's going on. Engagement is not something we can just singularly identify, because it is a multidimensional part of our own classroom communities. Luckily for us, we do have some frameworks that help us look at what engagement could look like, and it helps us break down the term of engagement a little bit more conceptually. If you joined us for our first session in this series, we discussed broadly the Universal Design for Learning framework. We will refer to that as UDL. And we've chosen UDL because it's pretty important. UDL guidelines are a tool used for the implementation of universal design for learning, the framework developed by CAST to optimize teaching and learning for all people based on scientific insights into how humans learn. And when we think about UDL, I always encourage the professors that I work with the courses that I design, and in my own learnings, UDL is one of the ways that I can make sure that I'm checking as many boxes in my learning design process as possible. And it makes it a little bit straightforward. Next month, we will talk about representation. The following month, we'll talk about action expression. This month is all about engagement. So let's take a look and see what UDL guidelines say about engagement. So if you've not yet accessed, maybe this is your first visit with us, we do encourage you to scan that QR code, visit udlguidelines.cast.org to get your access to this framework. This is going to really help you make instructional decisions, whether you're designing for professional learning or for your own courses. We're going to look specifically at the column that is design multiple means of engagement. When we look at just the engagement piece of UDL, it breaks it down into different categories. And I find these categories pretty beneficial when I'm looking at them and I'm going through my courses and my designs and say, am I providing these opportunities? I know if I'm providing these opportunities, I'm creating a much more accessible and inclusive learning experience. So the first thing is that welcoming interests and identities. In this domain, we can optimize choice and autonomy. We can optimize relevance, value, and authenticity. We can nurture joy and play, and we can address biases, threats, and distractions. On our next level, we can sustain effort and persistence for our students when we clarify the meaning and purposes of goals, when we optimize for challenge and support, when we foster collaboration, interdependence, and collective learning, when we foster that belonging and community, and when we offer action-oriented feedback, things that they can actually take and improve their own processes. We are helping them sustain effort and persistence. And when we recognize expectations, beliefs, and motivations of our learners, and we share that with them, when we help them develop awareness of themselves and the others in their community around them, when we promote their own individual and collective reflection as part of our own learning design framework, and when we cultivate empathy and restorative practices, we are building that emotional capacity with our learners. When we look at how this supports individuals across the spectrum, whether they have a disability or not, these are all fantastic practices to make sure everybody is welcome, everybody is sustaining effort, and everybody is building their emotional capacity. These match our existing definitions of engagement being multidimensional if we use these tricks and tools and strategies. It meets our strategies of engagement being inclusive, of engagement being malleable, and an engagement coming from a variety of antecedents. If we're looking especially for individuals who do maybe have an IEP 504 plan or have different considerations, when we use something like UDL, we are still designing with everybody in mind. So maybe we start with students and we're just focusing on that optimization of choice and autonomy. And when they are ready, when they have developed the skills necessary, we can gradually release them to that supportive area where they are sustaining their own effort and persistence. And eventually we can get them to that executive functioning level where that emotional capacity has been designed and developed, and they are equipped with those real lifelong strategies to help them succeed in their lives. All of this under this little column of designing multiple means of engagement from UDL support us in a wide variety of ways. When we think about welcoming interest and identities, I know that a lot of you on this call do a lot of these things, but those choice boards, we've talked about them for years. Developing some choice boards and giving your students choice of what they're going to do in those choice activities is key. And with the rise of artificial intelligence, there are platforms that help you generate some choice boards that are aligned to your either your state standards or whatever you're trying to teach with those learners. So you don't have to come up with all the options by yourself. You can just insert your own humanity and you can make those adjustments as needed. But how do we optimize relevance, value, and authenticity in the year 2025? In the year when our students who have social media can get onto TikTok or Instagram and look at the real life news that is happening around them. If things are happening in their real lives and we're not supporting or discussing or showing how what we are teaching them is relevant to their daily lives, we are doing them a disservice. We need to optimize that relevance, that value, that authenticity in all spaces so that they feel safe and secure and included. We need to remember to nurture joy and play as an important part of what we do as educators and in education. We cannot just keep doing by the books and worksheets. Our students need that space to experiment with one another socially, to understand these intricate relationships we have as humans, and a chance to nurture joy and to embrace that as part of their learning journey. We also need to make sure, especially in the age of AI, that we address biases, that we address threats and any distractions that may be prohibiting or inhibiting some of our students from learning, which thus makes it not a very welcoming space for them in our classrooms. When we think about designing for sustaining effort and persistence, the clarity and communication of their goals is of paramount importance. If your students do not know how to make their own goals, are we having those conversations with them? Do we know what their goals might be? Because it may not be aligned with the goals that you already have established in your mind for them. Are we optimizing challenge, understanding where they currently are and finding a way to get them to that next level in a challenging but supportive way? Are we giving our students exposure to collaboration, interdependence of how their individual part works among the whole group? And do we provide those opportunities for collective learning? Do we foster belonging and community in our classroom? And do we offer that action-oriented feedback? All of those things help build sustained effort and persistence. It makes our learning design more accessible and inclusive, and we're casting that wider net. And then when we design for emotional capacity, which can be very trying in times like these, we need to recognize the expectations and beliefs and motivations behind our learning community. We need to really focus on developing an awareness of ourselves as humans and how our humanity interacts with others around us. Promoting that individuality and yet that collective reflection. And then cultivating that empathy and those restorative practices, building that emotional capacity. I've been a big fan of journaling lately, and it does not relate to the computer science course that I'm currently teaching, but I like to check in with my students every couple of weeks and say, how are things going? We're on week 4. How are your classes going? What is one amazing thing that happened this week that you're going to remember next week? What is one goal that you make for next week that maybe is based on some temporary failures this week? Giving them a space for them and myself to just talk about things related to them really helps me make a deeper learning experience and a learning community for my students. Because for me, it can't all be about my content because they're humans and they need that guidance from the leaders in their lives. So before we move on to some tips, tricks, and strategies about designing learning experiences that are accessible, we have a little process. I know some things, we all know some things, but when we put what we know together, we know a lot of things. And so in this activity, I encourage you to either scan this QR code, we'll put the link in the chat. I'm going to give you just a couple minutes. This can be open after this session. If you're watching virtually, it should still be open for you to contribute if you would like to. But this is where you can look at our different areas. Welcoming interest and identities. There is a quadrant table that you could put in there. And what I'm asking, and I put an example in there for you all, is to think about your own practices and what you do in your life currently when it comes to doing things like welcoming individuals to your professional learning or welcoming the identities and interests of others. Take just a couple minutes and find whatever speaks to you, a couple of cells in those tables, and list your strategies. What's one technique that you use? What's something that you found successful? This is where we all learn together. You don't have to put your name on it if you don't want to. If you do want to, that's fine as well. This is really helping us build this engagement toolbox. So I'm going to stop talking, give you just a couple minutes to get this, and then we will get started again on some tips and tricks. And you are encouraged, if you're still mid-thought, contributing your engagement strategies, to continue to do so while we continue this conversation in this webinar. We're just going to do a little switcheroo real quick, and then we're going to learn some strategies and techniques from Kristen.
Thanks, John. I will definitely be checking out that collective leader because as you were showing those guidelines, I could already think of a few ideas. So I'll make sure to go in and add those in there. But thank you so much. That's very helpful. You can all see my screen now, right? Okay, perfect. All right. So we're going to talk about where UDL and accessibility combine. And if you have been able to join us on the other calls in this series, we talked a lot about WCAG guidelines, what those are, and also the new accessibility rule that was released from Department of Justice for the final rule for Title II of the American with Disabilities Act, or ADA, as we mostly like to call it. And so I'm not going to dig too much into those standards, but those are a set of standards recognized around the world for accessibility. And what's interesting to me is, as important as UDL is, I think about a classroom with the teacher. And if students are coming in and maybe we hadn't planned for them, we can still anticipate their needs. We may not do as good of a job without those UDL guidelines. We definitely would not. And it might be a little frustrating, cause a little anxiety when you haven't prepared in advance for the different types of learners coming in. But generally, if we can recognize their needs, educators are going to try to meet it. What happens with digital accessibility when we think about content on websites, in courses that might be asynchronous or provided in a like nonlinear fashion, and other digital like platforms that would maybe wouldn't have a live component to it, that may not happen. Like you don't know what a learner needs. Even in a webinar right now, I may not realize if someone needs captions or if someone needs the color contrast to be there. So that's where I think UDL combines with this WCAG, because that WCAG ensures that those things are in place and for everyone and helpful to everyone. So that's kind of where we're going to jump off on this and then look specifically at that engagement and where it aligns. Hopefully that all made sense. So we have a little poll for you, and this can just go into the chat. So talking about UDL, what's so amazing about a lot of the features that were created for individuals with disabilities are that we all now use a lot of these tools. So they were not designed for general population, but because they are so helpful, many of us use them. So I want to identify today which ones you use. So which of these features help you unlock learning in your daily digital adventures? Do you use captions or subtitles, text to speech, keyboard navigation, screen magnification or resizing things on your screen, and speech recognition or voice texting? And I can already see a lot of these coming in. I'm seeing some A and E, so definitely captions, subtitles. O and D, yep, screen. Yes, I am there with that one also. Anyone use keyboard navigation? I don't know if I see any of those there. That would be interesting. I would like to be able to do that more. I heard about a tool today where with Google that it will scan your face and you would be able to kind of like an eye gaze, but it was going to be available for all devices, for all Chromebooks. And I was like, ooh, that'd be helpful because I could then eat my lunch while I was working and be able to continue working while I eat my lunch. So I'm on board for that. But I just want to point out that a lot of these things, when we do provide it to all students, it is helpful to everyone, but also it helps reduce that stigma where, oh, I have like a special device or a special tool I need to use. No, it's available to everyone and everyone gets to use it. So we talked a little bit very briefly about the accessibility rule. This is a rule that Department of Justice released that is something that all governmental entities, including public school districts, will need to comply. And there's different compliance dates, but for many, it will be next April 2026. And so what's really exciting is they just released new guidance on that. So I wanted to put that in the chat for you. So I'm going to pull that up right now briefly and add that to the chat. That was just released on January 8th. And so any of you that might be someone tasked with helping your district with that process of becoming compliant with that rule, this guidance will be very useful. I actually just worked with a district today to help them with this, and we literally just went step by step through this guidance, and it made it very helpful to have that. So I wanted to make sure we address that right away so that you have that guidance in case you are one of those that helps your district get ready for this rule. All right, so where do UDL and WCAG meet? Under that engagement guideline number 1, John so eloquently described those guidelines. And this first one is providing options for recruiting interest. And under that, there were these 3, individual choice and autonomy, optimize relevance, value, and authenticity. But the one we're going to focus on today is this last one, this minimize threats and distractions. This is where I really see an intersection with UDL and WCAG. So we're going to go really specific with this today. So WCAG SC 2.4.6 is under headings and labels, and it basically just says clearly organized content helps maintain focus. But one of the key parts of this guideline or standard is something which is very helpful, which is document styles. So using document styles to organize content, we're going to talk in a minute about why that would be good. But if you would like to follow along, I'm going to give you a minute to either scan this code or go to that bit.ly link. And then when I start demonstrating how to make a document accessible in styles, might want to follow along. If you're like me, I have to do it in order to learn it. So I definitely recommend following along. My goal is to, when I show it, is to do it twice, show it once, and then show it again so that you can join in with me too. So I'm going to leave that up for just a minute to give you time to access it. And I see it also in the chat. So if you're following along in the chat, you can access that there too. And if you're watching the recording, you have it even better because you can pause. You can pause and rewind, which is helpful. All right, so we're going to move along. So I'm going to show you, this screen shows a example of a document created using styles. And this is actually used in Microsoft Word, but I want to point out that almost any word processing platform you use, Google Docs, even Canva, Pages, any of those all have styles built in. I don't know of any that doesn't, luckily. So we are going to learn how to use that. I'm going to demonstrate today in Microsoft Word because that's the one that I typically use, but really these are available in most any platform. So you'll see here that this just looks like any typical document. It has a title, and then it has some subheadings. So this would be like the main heading or heading 1. And then we have some subheadings here. And then underneath those, you can't see this just yet. Let me actually click. If you were to click on that little arrow there, it will then look like this and open up new information. So we're going to talk about how this helps in just a minute. So when we talk about threats and distractions, so providing a clear structure that chunks and organizes the content. So we have a clear way that we can organize everything. And if we're consistently using that, which kind of goes into bullet point 3 here, if we're consistently using that same format, it's really going to help students, participants, whoever is looking at that document understand it better. It also allows users to hide content. If you noticed on this first one, you don't see what's underneath those. And that can be very helpful for multiple individuals who might have ADHD or other disabilities, or even those of us that just sometimes are not paying attention because we're tired, we're frustrated, we're anxious. So having it broken down where we can hide content is also very helpful to all users. And then also eliminates, again, distracting content, which is the one we just talked about. So again, this is for all users. However, for individuals that use a screen reader to access content, document styles are essential. So I want to point out how those kind of work. So this description on this slide says screen readers convert digital text into speech or braille, helping individuals with visual impairments access the content. They use headings like a table of contents, allowing users to navigate quickly between sections. Proper heading structure make it easier for individuals to find and skim information efficiently. So this may not seem necessary when we think about a one-page document. Okay, so to navigate, but think about manuals that are given out by districts. Those could be hundreds of pages. Some PDFs are hundreds of pages. I'm sure, John, in your higher ed, you have lots of manuals and documents and things that you have to access that have many, many pages.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so we think about an individual using a screen reader, they're not going to want to read that cover to cover like they would a novel when they're just trying to find a key piece of information. So what that screen reader will do is it's going to jump from heading to heading. So it would know this is a heading 1. In most documents, we would want that to be the title, and we probably would only have one designated as a heading 1 or H1. But then this here would be a heading 2, and this is another heading 2. So the screen reader would jump, and the user would say, steps to setting up an accessible document. Nope, got that. I don't need that. Then it's going to jump to document creation tips. Oh, yes, this is what I need. And then it will start reading the other content. So this is something that requires a lot of savviness. I am not skilled at using a screen reader, but individuals that need them are very savvy at this, and it allows them to have equitable access to the content, which is essential. So Another reason why the styles are important is beyond even that individual document, whether it be a Microsoft Word, Google Doc, or even like slides or PowerPoint or a Canva presentation. A lot of times these will need to be saved as a PDF. And so I'm going to just briefly go into how PDFs work so you can kind of understand why it's important. If you go, I almost guarantee you, you can prove me wrong and email me, but if you go to any presentation, webinar, course on making PDFs accessible, I almost guarantee that the trainer will tell you the most important thing is that the source document needs to be accessible. So in this case, today, I'm going to demonstrate that source document is Word. So you want to make that as accessible as possible before it ever gets to Adobe, because once it gets to Adobe, it's going to be a lot harder to remediate that on the back end. So we're not going to go too much into PDFs today, but we are going to look at how to make that source document as accessible as possible. So when you do bring it to PDF and need it accessible, it's going to be a lot easier. So looking at a PDF, we have the visual layer. This preserves the layout and appearance. You can see the graphic here kind of shows you what that looks like. And screen readers ignore this layer. So this is just there for other members of the population, but a screen reader is not going to use that layer. The content layer. This is the text of the document, including formatting like fonts and colors. And finally, this is the important layer for screen readers, is the tags layer. And you can kind of start to see over here what that looks like. We talked about H1, H2, paragraph, and that is visible there. And this layer is used primarily for screen readers. So for example, headings, lists, links, and tables, screen readers use this layer to determine the document structure and reading order. And tags only impact screen reader users. So there is a whole layer in a PDF just there for those screen readers. So I wanted to point that out so you can kind of get an idea of why that those styles are so important when we're using it. And I always like to talk about, whenever you're learning something new, that cognitive load theory. So at first, this might seem daunting. It's probably going to be challenging if you're not used to using styles. But once you get into it, it really isn't an extra thing you have to do. And in fact, it could actually make it simpler every time you need to create a document. I hope that's what you'll find, but you got to just give it a little bit of time. And it's going to take the habit of getting into always using styles when you open a new document and create it. So we're going to get started now. And I'm going to leave that there. Okay, so I'm going to pull up the document. This is that same one that I shared with you if you would like to follow along. Some of it is kind of already done for you, so I didn't make you do it from scratch. And this is there to kind of give you something to look at later, but also to play around with. Now, if you have pulled it up, you will notice it's view only access. If you do want to play and make some of the changes that I'm doing, you'll want to make a copy of it so that you would be able to edit it as we go along. So go ahead and make a copy. You could also just pull up a blank document and use this one that I'm sharing right now as just a guide that you look at. So either one of those is okay. But I would recommend, if you have access to Microsoft Word, to use Word because it will look different in another platform. So here we have the styles. I'm going to toggle down to steps, and you hopefully can already see how chunking it like this is helpful, because I'm not trying to look ahead at what's coming up. I just have these few things to look at and I'm not distracted. So I'm already minimizing those distractions here in the styles. And we'll see here that the first thing it says for creating an accessible document is to add a title and language. So we're going to go ahead and do the title. So I'm going to hit File here. And we're going to go to Info. And I purposely left this one blank to do a title. So I want to point out that a lot of times individuals will think, oh, the title is just the file name. But a lot of times those file names are kind of funky. They can be very long. They have dates. They have things in there that are not needed for a screen reader. So it's important to put an actual title. So we're going to go ahead and do that now. Okay. And then if your default language is a different language than what you would want to use, you may also need to set that up. But the only thing actually required is to do that title. So when you get this exported as a PDF, it will actually, when you run an accessibility check on a PDF, it's going to force you to add a title if you haven't already done it here. So it's good to just go ahead and do that first thing. Just go ahead and add the title. And as I promised, I'm going to show that one more time. So again, you've got the document up. I'm going to go to File. I'm going to go to Info. And then the title is there, but this is where you would add it. And you can also add an author, but mine by default automatically puts the author in. But that's something to kind of check. All right, so you'll see the next thing actually says use the style menu to organize content. So that styles menu is right here. You can expand it and it's going to kind of put it over to the right. I personally like to keep it here, but that would be your own preference. But for today, I'm going to just kind of show it here. And you can already see that I have my styles set. Towards the end of this demonstration, I'm going to show you how to create like global changes so that every time you open a document, your styles would be there. So unless you had like a special document that might need to be different, you would have those same styles always there. So hopefully that will help you see how this can actually make your life easier once you get the hang of it. So let's go into this first one, and let's say we don't really like this color green. We want to jazz it up a little bit. So there's a couple things we can do. So I can actually go here, change the color, and then go up to heading and right click, and I can hit update heading 1 to match the selection. So now in the event I had other headings, heading 1s, which I wouldn't because that's the title, but if I did, they all should come out to that purple. But another thing we can do is to just set all of these headings right away with how we would like. So I'm going to right click on heading 1, click modify, and right here is where we can set the font, if we want bold, italic, underline, the color, all of those things right here. So that is where we would do that. And then we want to make sure we keep that the name of heading 1, because that's going to help with that accessibility later. So again, this is where we can go in and set. So let me just change it to kind of this eggplant color. Hit OK, and you'll see that it automatically does change it there. I'm going to show you this on a heading 2 also because I want you to see how it's going to automatically apply here. So we're going to right click on heading 2 here and modify. And let's just say I'm going to make it italicized just for a minute. I don't like that, so I'm probably going to change it right back. But I want to give you the idea. Hit OK. And you'll see here, oh, something went wrong with this one. This must not be a heading 2. I don't know why. Let's see. Modify. I might not have saved it properly. And automatically update. Yes. It should change. There we go. I don't know why it did that. I messed up something. So there it is, and they are all italics. I do not like that, so I'm going to go right away and change that back. But if you did like italics, that would be how you could change that globally. So you can start to see if this was a very long document with like pages and pages and pages, how easily you can go ahead and make those changes. So we're going to open up the next one on document creation tips. So there's a few things I just want you to be aware of when working with styles. You've already learned majority of what you would need to start creating accessible documents just by adding that title and using those styles in the first place. But one thing we want to do is just avoid this menu altogether. I don't want to get rid of it in my toolbar because sometimes I'm just creating a document for myself and I want to be able to strike through and I want to be able to change the font really quick and for my to-do list. But when you're creating document to share globally, we just want to ignore this, especially the font when it comes to font size. Because if you're changing something and manually making something into a header, so for example, this is a normal or paragraph. And if I just go ahead and give it the same, like give it a 14, make it bold, get rid of that still is not going to make it a heading 2, even though it looks like a heading 2. When a screen reader reads it, it's still going to read it as a paragraph. it's not going to read it properly. So we really want to make sure we're only doing those changes from that styles menu and not, and not from this menu here. So try to think about ignoring that as much as you possibly can. Another thing to note is that headers and footers can be problematic. They are not usually read by a screen reader, and it's like an extra level that you have to do in Adobe. So if you have content that is important, I would recommend avoiding using the headers and footers unless it's just something that really isn't important for a screen reader to read. Also, a screen reader will read from a heading level 1 to a 6. I typically only ever have to use 1 through 3. It's rare that I would need more than that, but if you really need a lot of heading levels, if you have an outline, again, John in higher ed, they probably do have lots and lots of levels. I typically only have to go to 1 through 3. But I did want to point out that beyond a level 6, a screen reader usually will not recognize it. They're going to recognize it as a paragraph or normal. So you want to try to stick with heading level 1 through 6 for accessibility purposes.
And I just want to point out, since you were talking about higher ed, I wrote almost an entire dissertation without understanding the power of styles. And it was only after I did all that hard work that I was like, I could have made things so much easier for myself had I just done it the right way. And so now that I've learned the things that I did not know at the time, I definitely vouch for that. Just learn it. It takes just a couple seconds and get in that process of using it. And then you can go to bed at night and be like, I'm creating accessible documents and it's easier work for me and we're good to go.
Well, I've actually done the same thing. When I wrote my book, my publisher was ISTE, and they use styles, and I didn't use styles, and it was embarrassing to have to tell me to go back and make it. So I had to go back and retrofit everything into the styles. But once I did it, I was like, oh, this is a lot better. So kudos to ISTE for teaching me that, but I totally agree. It's like until you know, you don't know, and you just have to do better once you do know. So yes, I totally agree. So here we have our next one is when saving the Word as a PDF, make sure to click on options and check. So I'm going to show that really quick. Most likely this is already checked for you if you have a current version of Word, but I'm going to go here to File, Save as a PDF. And here under options, just making sure this enable accessibility and reflow with tagged Adobe PDF. So just having that checked is a good practice. Again, it usually is going to default. I'm going to show that one more time. So again, that's File, Save as a PDF, options, and this enable accessibility and reflow. Some best practices will also say to use, when saving as a PDF, to use this Acrobat tab. So that's something to think about as well. What we want to try to avoid is printing to PDF. Print to PDF sometimes can cause more accessibility errors. But I'm going off on a tangent now. I'm going to get us back to styles because I will go on all night, and I know you all want to eat dinner and have other things to do. So the last one here, oh, sorry, two more. So another thing you can find useful is an outline mode that gives you, so let me show you that. So if you go to view and then outline, it will kind of give you a sense if your styles are all set up correctly. Like if you remember that one that looked right and somehow it had gotten off, it would have shown that here. I don't love this, but I want to point out because some individuals do like it. These gaps here are where those pictures are, so that's why it looks a little funky, but you would be able to kind of just a little bit easier see that the settings are there. We've got our heading 1, heading 2, and then our paragraph. Again, it's not my favorite view, but I just want to point out that it can be useful to use that outline. And another thing really good is creating styles that have at least a 2-point difference in font size. So we're going to check ours really quick. So I'm going to go to my heading 1 again, modify. We see it has an 18-point font. So that's kind of our standard right now. So heading 2, modify, and it is 14. So that's at least 2. That's 4-point difference. So that would be okay. And then heading level 3, same thing, it's a 12. So these will all check and be okay. I want to point out this is not part of WCAG. This is just a general best practice in the accessibility world. And it makes sense because this is for anyone that is using visual cues to organize content, to be able to see a difference between the levels. So it's kind of a common sense one. All right, so now we're going to look at setting up default styles and fonts. We've kind of done 90% of this already, but if I go up here to, we're going to stop picking on heading level 1. We're going to go to heading level 2. So I'm going to right click and hit modify again. And we've kind of done everything we needed, but let's just make, let's see, one little more change here. We're going to actually change the color a little bit. We're going to use this one. We're going to hope that one's an accessible color. And then what I want to do is I make sure that automatically update is checked. But see here that the default is only in this document. So if we do that, if you get all your styles exactly the way you want, but you leave it on this default, the next time you open Word, it's going to go right back to Aptos, the new cool font from Microsoft, and I think some others too. And that's not what we want. I want my beautiful Avenir next. I don't want Aptos today. So what I'm going to do is click over to this new documents based on this template. And now when I hit OK, the next time when I go to open a new document, it is going to keep that blue color for me there. So that is what we would want. I'm going to show that one more time. I'm actually going to put it back this time. So I'm going to hit modify again, change this back to my default black. And again, every time it's going to default back to only in this document, and I'm going to switch it to new and OK. I will say this occasionally has been glitchy for me, and I've maybe had to do it a couple of times. So don't get frustrated if it doesn't work the first time. Just try again and open a new document and try it again. But generally, it will work. Every time I go in now, I have my Avenir, my green, which was my default from before, and then my black. But it's so easy to change those. If you have another document and you want to use your brand colors, like our beautiful NCCE colors we might use, it is pretty easy to change that really quickly once you have the style set. You'll see mine are only set 1, 2, 3. Like I said, I generally don't need these other ones. This is just the default. I haven't set that. So it's just the one that's there. So it really is pretty easy. Hopefully you're all going to run out. And if you're not already using styles, you're going to like this. If you already use styles for simplicity, hopefully you'll be excited to know that it also makes your document more accessible. So I just have one more thing. I want to reach out to you and in the chat, get a little feedback. So for our next meeting in February, we're going into representation, our next guideline, but we're going to be going back to engagement again in April. And I know today I got really specific with document styles. So I want to give you a chance to let me know, help me prioritize what we're going to do the next time we focus on engagement again. So if you can put any or all of these, you can have multiple. We may have time to get to all of them because these topics aren't quite as extensive as styles. But this first one here, allowing control over the timing of tasks. If that's something that you'd really like to learn about, choose A. Providing choice and autonomy with video captions. If that's something you'd want to learn about, choose B. Examining sensory input and chunking content is C. And encouraging student empathy with accessibility. So any of those things that you want to make sure that we cover that next time we tackle engagement, let us know. I'm seeing a variety so far, so I'm going to try to get to as many of those as we can, but definitely keep those in there and coming. All right, and I'm going to turn it back over to John now to kind of wrap us up today.
Perfect. So we are so thankful that you came and joined us. We talked a lot about, excuse me, engagement. We learned some new tips and tricks on making Word documents more accessible using styles. And we were able to just talk about how we are going on this journey together when it comes to accessibility, the accessibility adventure. We hope that you will join us February 20th from 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern, where we're going to have our next installment, Representation. And we will have another one, our final installment for this little series in March. And we will repeat some of these same sessions if you have missed out in April, May, and June. Scan that QR code, visit that tiny URL. There's going to be recordings to previous sessions and RSVPs for future ones. That's going to be the place you want to hang out to make sure that you know what's going on with the accessibility adventure. Also, if you're looking for an amazing conference, the registration is still open. You can attend NCCE 25, which is next month, right? It is going to be here soon. We've got Dan Fitzpatrick, author of The AI Educator, and Matt Miller, author of Ditch That Textbook. Scan that QR code or visit www.ncce.org to register or learn more about bringing your organization to NCCE's conference. And we thank you again for joining us. We're going to hang around if anybody has any questions, and we will see you next month for the next installment. Bye.
Bye.